Ever since my husband and I decided to adopt, we knew that at some point we would have to deal with clueless people. There's always someone who thinks they can have an opinion on other people's lives, as if they're an expert on everything. Our son came into our lives at the age of 6, and from day one, we felt that he had always been ours. There was no doubt, no difference, no ridiculous to belong or not to belong thing. But of course, not everyone can see beyond their own navel. And that's how I met the most unbearable woman who ever crossed my path. It all happened one Sunday. We were in a restaurant enjoying our family lunch when I noticed a woman staring at us without a shred of discretion. You know that person you think you can stare at for as long as you like without disguising it? That was her. I tried to ignore it because, well, I'm not the kind of person who's going to be bothered by anyone staring. But she wouldn't look away, as if she had discovered a great mystery and was trying to decipher it. It was only when she decided to open her mouth that I understood what was going on.
What a different family.
My husband and I exchanged glances. Here it comes. There's always someone who has to say something stupid, as if the world is begging for their opinion. Yes, we're a family, I replied without much interest, but she wasn't satisfied.
But is he really yours?
At that moment, my patience evaporated. I blinked, trying to process whether I had understood correctly. What do you mean? She smiled, that typical smile of people who think they're being kind, but are really just spouting prejudice.
Well, you don't look alike. People will always notice that he doesn't really belong to you.
I felt my husband stop eating and simply watch the scene, already knowing that I was going to fix it. My son, without really understanding what was going on, looked at me with that innocent little face of someone who just wanted to keep eating his fries. And it was at that moment that something inside me just stopped. I turned to the woman, gave her my best smile, and let out in a very calm tone, "And you look like you were brought up by your aunt and uncle, and no one here is asking if you belong to your family, right?" Her fork stopped midway. It was a beautiful moment. She widened her eyes and seemed to lose a little color, but instead of staying quiet and accepting defeat, she tried to justify herself.
I just meant that. Children need to grow up knowing their true origins.
That's it, that was it. The icing on the cake of ignorance. I took a deep breath with no patience left and replied, "My son knows where he came from. The problem is that you think there's only one type of family. But let me tell you something new. Life doesn't revolve around what you think." My husband laughed softly because he knew I wasn't going to let it go, but at that moment, the waiter noticed the confusion and decided to intervene. "Everything all right here?" My husband, with all the calm in the world, just pointed at the woman. "Look, we're trying to have lunch, but this lady insists on bothering us." The waiter crossed his arms and looked at her bored. "Ma'am, if you keep bothering the other customers, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." That was the best part of the day. The woman turned purple with rage, picked up her handbag, stood up with that "I'm being wronged" look, and left the restaurant stomping her feet as if she had been attacked. My son looked at me and asked, "Mom, why was that girl so angry?" I smiled and ruffled his hair. "Because some people don't know when to be quiet, son. I thought it was over there. But I didn't know that this woman was going to take her obsession to another level." And what happened next was even worse. After the embarrassment in the restaurant, I imagined that the woman would get on with her life and forget I existed. But apparently she had nothing more interesting to do than worry about my family. The following Tuesday, I decided to go to the bakery with my son. It was one of those places where everyone knows everyone, a quiet environment where no one would expect anything annoying to happen. But of course, I was underestimating the power of the lack of things to do. While I was choosing the bread, I noticed a strange buzz near the checkout. Some people were looking in my direction and whispering. I ignored it at first because, frankly, I'm not the center of the universe. But when I went to pay, the attendant hesitated as she took the money and looked at me with a worried expression.
Look, I'm sorry to ask this, but is your son really yours?
Time seemed to stop for a few seconds. "What?" She was visibly uncomfortable, but continued.
It's just that I've been told that maybe he was, I don't know, picked up in an illegal way.
I felt my brain melt at the stupidity of the situation. I laughed incredulously because I didn't know whether to get angry or just give up on humanity. "Who told you that?" She looked away quickly, and that's when I saw it. Sitting at the back of the bakery, pretending to be busy with her cell phone, was the same woman from the restaurant. Her breathing was heavy. I took my change, turned, and went straight to her table. You need to get a hobby. She looked up slowly, forcing an air of surprise. First you crowd me in the restaurant, now you're spreading rumors in the bakery. What's wrong with you? She crossed her arms and let out an exaggerated sigh.
I just commented that I found it strange. You turned up with a child who doesn't look like you. I thought it would be prudent to raise the issue.
At that moment, I felt a wave of hatred and amusement at the same time. Was she really trying to play family inspector? I leaned over the table slightly and whispered with a smile, "The whole town will hear about your concern." The woman turned pale instantly. I picked up my bag and left, but I knew it was far from over. If she thought she could play with my family's reputation, little did she know what was to come. After the scene in the bakery, I knew this story couldn't die there. That woman crossed a line that no one should cross. She played with my family's reputation, messed with my son, and even had the audacity to act as if she were providing a public service. And if there's one thing I've learned throughout my life, it's that people like that don't understand conversation, only consequences. But I'm not the kind of person who shouts, hits out, or loses my temper in front of everyone. I'm the type who waits, who watches from the sidelines as the person's own arrogance digs the hole into which they will fall. So that's exactly what I did. The next morning, I woke up early and went out to do some shopping. I stopped at the flower shop, the cafe, and the market. Nothing out of the ordinary. But between one greeting and another, between a coffee and a shopping bag, I let slip some very interesting information. Nothing exaggerated, nothing forced, just the plain and simple truth. Can you believe that people are spreading the word that my son may have been adopted illegally? The reaction was instantaneous. The owner of the flower shop, a lady who had been in the neighborhood for years and knew everyone, widened her eyes as if I had just said I had seen a ghost. What? The woman was so indignant that she had to hold on to the counter to keep from falling backwards. Who said that? I sighed, putting the flowers in the trolley, as if I were talking about the most trivial thing in the world. You know how it is. There's always someone who thinks they can meddle in other people's lives. She shook her head, clearly annoyed, and pulled out her cell phone, probably to relay the information to half the town. Perfect. At the cafe, the reaction was even better. The barista, who already knew my family and always asked about my son, had an expression of pure disgust when she heard the story. What nonsense. Who does something like that? People who have nothing else useful to do, I replied, stirring my coffee. In less than 3 hours, the whole neighborhood knew. And as everyone knows, in small places, information travels faster than light. At first, she didn't notice anything. She continued walking around the neighborhood with that air of superiority, probably thinking she had done the community a great favor by raising important issues. But then small changes began to happen. The once friendly neighbors stopped greeting her. Store assistants stopped making conversation. Even the butcher, who always sorted out the best cuts for her, began to treat her coldly without making a point of being polite. At first, she tried to ignore it, but as the days went by and the silent treatment continued, she began to notice. At the cafe, where she always received a forced good morning, she now received only an impassive stare and a coffee served without a single smile. At the bakery, where she used to exchange gossip with the attendant, now all she got was an automatic, "Can I get you anything else?" And at the market, she realized she was alone. The encounter took place one late afternoon among the fruit shelves. I was picking some apples when I felt a heavy presence next to me. When I looked, there she was, with her arms crossed, a tense expression, and a look full of frustration. For a second, I thought she was just going to ignore me and continue shopping, but she didn't seem willing to let it go. She just stood there until she finally opened her mouth.
What did you do?
Her tone was accusatory, but wavering. For the first time, she seemed uncertain, uncomfortable, as if she had realized that maybe she wasn't as sweet as she thought. I didn't reply straight away. I took another apple, put it in the bag, gave a slight smile, and only then looked at her. "What do you mean?" She snorted as if I was pretending not to understand.
People are treating me differently. What did you tell them?
Her tone was nervous, but for the first time, it wasn't arrogant. And that, for me, was the best part. I crossed my arms like someone assessing a funny situation. Oh, I only mentioned the truth, that there are people out there who are so obsessed with my family that they've decided to spread unfounded rumors. It seems that people didn't like the story very much. She turned red on the spot. Her lips tightened, her shoulders tensed, and for a moment I thought she was going to explode. But then came the most interesting part. She didn't say anything. For the first time since this absurd story began, she didn't have an answer ready. She didn't try to justify herself. She didn't give a speech about raising important issues. She didn't pretend to be a victim. She just stood there, swallowing, realizing that she had lost. The city had already judged for me, and there was nothing more she could do. Without saying another word, she picked up her shopping cart and walked away. And since that day, she's never messed with me again. Nowadays, when we cross paths in the street, she looks away, crosses to the other side, and pretends not to see me. And you know what? I couldn't have asked for a better ending. In the end, she learned her lesson in the most humiliating way possible, in silence. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Want to see more content like this? We've put together 2 special videos for you. Just click on the card on the screen. See you in the next video.